To give a bit of context before I start talking about the film, never before had I ever heard about Dune. Not the book, not the movies based on it, nothing. So I had no interest whatsoever when it was announced a new Dune movie was being made. And even when the trailer was released and everyone was talking about how the film looked legitimately good, I was stubborn enough to just not watch it, and only when going to see The Suicide Squad with a friend, one of the trailers for Dune popped up, and I was surprised with how interesting it looked, seeming different from other sci-fi films that all basically looked and felt the same. And with the trailer giving me a good first impression, I was actually interested in seeing what the film could do. And to say the least, it definitely leaves a good taste in your mouth. Though I felt a little empty and incomplete, not just because it's a part one for a two-part narrative, but in other ways as well. So I'm probably not going to be as positive as other people are to a certain extent, where people seem to have few to no issues with the film compared to me. So just so that you all know, all the criticisms I have about this film are from a non-Dune fan, so take that all with a pinch of salt. But to get things started, the biggest positive for this film are the visuals. Like, my god, I haven't seen a film this well shot in a while. People have described it as having an grand, epic scale to it, and it truly lives up to that. The scope of this film is huge, and the visuals and sounds do not disappoint in that regard. I mean, god damn, those sandworms. Everything from shot composition, lighting, music, sound effects, CGI, it is all amazing, giving me a lot of Christopher Nolan vibes from it, honestly, with its scale. Like, you understand the harshness of the desert from the visuals alone, with how beautiful and dangerous it is. Even in something like the newer Star Wars films, there hasn't really been this kind of excellent conveying of a planet setting before. And the sound design as well is incredible, where it actually made me a little sad that I didn't go to see this in theaters. The world building as well was something I immensely enjoyed. I understood the importance of spice, the technology looked real, lived in, and not some fake clean looking shit from other films. The technology was interesting and clever for the world being set up, where I could actually see some of those vehicles and equipment being actual inventions thousands of years from now. Also, the set, costume, and prop designs were all awesome, and I love how everything looked. There was this distinction between the nice, clean, elegant clothing worn by House Atreides, but also the somewhat dirty, beat-up military equipment worn by soldiers and them as well. And although I wasn't able to understand everything in the world, which I'll get to later, what I did see and understand, I loved. Okay, now this is where I'm going to get into the film, so if you don't want to hear any spoilers, I recommend this film, okay? Go out and see it, either in theaters or on HBO Max. But with that, let's talk about the stuff that didn't entirely gel with me. Now, the most difficult part about reviewing this film is that I have to look at this as both an adaptation of a highly influential book and as a part one to the series. Because compared to other series where the first film is usually a contained narrative that can be its own thing and also set up a continuation very well, such as A New Hope, but to me, that's where this film both exceeds and falters in. Where on one hand, this film is a terrific act one of a larger narrative, but then feels hollow and unsatisfying as a film where its part 2 has yet to be greenlit. Now, when I say hollow, I'm referring to the characters, and by the unsatisfying, I mean the narrative structure. Firstly, the narrative itself is wonderful, and I found it quite interesting with it being a lot like Game of Thrones in space, with different houses, political coercion, backstabbings, and more. But the difficult part was how some of the world wasn't clearly explained, to me at least, such as why the Reverend Mother decided to see Paul and test him at that moment and not explain why it's dangerous for a male to have the ability, or why Paul's mother is so worried and knows about him being the possible Arrakis Jesus. Like, also, in a world that clearly has guns, it makes no use of them except for one instance in the opening and one where Paul is about to use one. Soldiers are instead using swords to kill each other like it's the Dark Ages, compared to handheld weapons that can clearly damage massive spaceships. And maybe that's just because of the personal shields people use, but you can see that those are clearly getting broken through with regular long-range weapons. Secondly, the characters are very, very hollow. No one except maybe a couple people have a personality beyond being worried or serious. Like, I can understand that for Paul since he's going through a ton during this movie, but not really for anyone else. I mean, at least until they arrive on Arrakis or when the Harkonnen attack, the only characters to have some form of a personality is Duncan, who brings some much needed humanity to the cast. The Baron is intimidating and foreboding, but nothing else. It's kind of like the Emperor from Star Wars, who has nothing to him, but at least it's fun to watch how evil he is and how much he loves being evil. He just feels generic aside from his design and inspiration for other stories. But really, did they have to pull the whole you promised me you would release this person, and I did this by betraying other people and killing all these guys. Then is killed by the villain thing. I get he's evil, but couldn't you have done something else? Like, come on. And look, to me, it doesn't matter if this is close to the book, following it, whatever. If something is an issue, such as character development, then it should be addressed and fixed. Like, I don't need characters telling jokes every second like Marvel films to make certain ones feel different from each other. I mean, Dune only has like one joke in the entire runtime, which is shown in a trailer, and at least that helps keep the tension up and really tonally consistent, where no one's just making it seem like it's not that bad. But anyways, no one does a bad job at all. Even after all those criticisms, I still think everyone does fantastic, with my personal favorite performances being that of Oscar Isaac and Timothée Chalamet, who have enough screen time where I can tell the relationship this father and son have is deep, and how it shows different perspectives in the story, where if someone's who's more of an outsider to a bigger story unfolding, and the other perspective of someone who's trying to find their identity in the middle of an epic story revolving around them. And my final issue is with the ending, where it just sort of ends in a very odd place. Like, it doesn't end where it would a regular movie at a climax. And of course, that's because this is a part one of a narrative, basically setting up everything to happen in the next movie. But honestly, I understand that to a certain extent. I mean, take Deathly Hallows Part 1. That movie as well takes its time with its narrative and is the first part of one book, waiting to tell the rest in its second. And yeah, the characters in the world in that one had already been laid out to that point compared to Doom, but at the very least, Deathly Hallows was able to end off in a narratively satisfying way that still set up a finale. But look, I can keep going on and on about the things in this movie I did and didn't like. I think it's one of the most visually stunning films I've seen in a while. But the characters have no life to them. I enjoyed the world building and the setup in the universe, but not enough in certain areas to clear up confusion, and so on and so forth. To me, Doom is a 7 out of 10. It's not a bad movie by any stretch of the imagination, but it falls a little short in certain areas for me that bring it down from being a great film. And my liking of it is gonna be dependent on the yet-to-be-confirmed sequel, and I honestly wish I could share my enthusiasm like other people. I really do. But I guess I'm just weird and I'll be against the consensus, so whatever, I guess.